All right, and with that, we'll get started. Thanks to everybody for joining our webinar on occupancy monitoring for essential services like groceries and pharmacies today. My name is Graham Smith. I'm with Density, and it's been my pleasure since I've started here to work with Luke Horgan. Luke has a deep background in data. He's worked for AAA, for HBO, and served in the Air Force as well. Now he runs a store in San Antonio, Texas called Jefferson Bodega. We've invited him here today to share his stories, both around his experience in his community, around COVID, what he's doing, and what he's done in the past, and where he sees things going in the future. If you have questions, we will have room at the end for those. You should see a Q&A box on your display. Feel free to add questions as we go, either with your name or anonymously. If there are any questions that we can't get to during Q&A, we'll be sure to have somebody follow up if you leave your email. So with that, Luke, who are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Graham. How you doing? Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. My name is Luke Horgan. Sorry, I'm in the bodega, so it's a little loud in here. We're getting a beer delivery, though, so beer deliveries first. I'm sure you understand. Let me step outside. All right, so the Jefferson Bodega, it started out sort of as a concept after spending really the greater part of my career designing sort of business funnels or customer experiences, digital experiences. I always kind of wanted to do something in a retail experience and apply the concepts that I'd learned in my career in digital experiences. So we wanted to make, to put that real simply, a really cool, fun convenience store that had basically set the bar as higher than convenient.
Awesome. Well, one photo I've always really liked about trolling your social media is this one on the left. So
that's representative really of the spirit of the bodega. So just a quick story about bodega. We were going to call it Bodega. That was the name of it. Where I grew up in New York City, that was the name of corner stores, basically you call them bodegas. And then I went to high school here in San Antonio where it was a different kind of thing and they didn't really use that term the same way. So I thought we'd just make it the first San Antonio bodega. But so many people came up in the 9 months we were working on it. So many people came up to the gates and rattled the door and said, "What are you doing?" But the way they phrased it was, "What are you doing to my store?" As though it was theirs. And I thought, well, that's odd because I'm working really hard on it and I paid a lot of money for it. I thought it was mine. But so many people did it that I realized it's not exclusively my store because this building is so old and it's been a store for so long. There are grandfathers and great-grandmothers out there who came by and said, "No, I shopped here for years and this is my neighborhood, my store." So we renamed it Jefferson Bodega because it's our bodega. The name of the neighborhood is the Jefferson District. So we decided to name it Jefferson Bodega in celebration of that. Towards that end, as COVID sort of started and things heated up, more and more people heard that we were trying to help give things out or help the community. And so they in turn brought things to give out. And this is just one example of that.
That's fantastic. And it looks like you also like do local grilling and stuff as well.
Well, yeah, like that's actually, that one is me eating dinner here. And back, before all this, just cooking burgers for people that came by. We weren't selling them or anything. It's just, again, the sort of the spirit of the bodega. And it's also very Texas. Like, you got to grill at least like 2-3 tons a week year round.
I'm jealous you have the climate to do that. And so, you've talked a lot about data in your career. You're helping people out in their local community. How are you bringing that to them?
So the concept of the bodega, while it's really fun and everything's well labeled and fresh, the part I was talking about initially when I said digital experiences, applying some of the learnings there, is that basically you've got on any kind of a website or an app, you have this funnel of behavior. X amount of people visit it, and then you ask X amount of those people to do something on it, and then some percentage of them click the button. So there's always this funnel of behavior that you see over and over in data, whatever sort of program or application you're looking at. It's always this funnel behavior. And what I want to do is to measure it the same way here at the bodega. So I know how much sales I have because I'm using a really cool system from Clover. So I can check all of my sales and I can check all of my SKUs, like the different items against one another. I can check my categories. That's really cool. That's one thing most convenience stores aren't doing already. And then I also have a really cool sort of advertising system or information system. So there's 23 screens all around the store. And those screens can change to say either Jefferson Bodega, or it can say like Pepsi. And then I can measure, did the sales go up if I made them say all Pepsi? Did I sell more Pepsi? But the one piece I was always missing is sort of the denominator. I need this information over people. So that's kind of where I had initially seen density, and as a way to sort of like bring density into like a small retail environment was, what are my sales over people?
Oh, awesome. Okay, cool. Well, with that, I'd love to say just a few words about density, kind of set the table for the deeper conversation about Jefferson Bodega and your data. Let's see here. So, what is density? We're a sensor mounted above a doorway that measures human traffic as they enter and exit a space. And we're designed to measure in real time, sub-second, as you know, Luke, and with immense accuracy, the occupancy of that space. So as we'll see in a few moments, we're also going to provide you with an analytics platform that's helping Bodega and others understand their space and make those informed decisions like sales over people. Very quickly, we were founded in Syracuse, New York in 2014. We still do our own manufacturing there. And while we work with many different types of organizations, the reason why we're here today is to talk about folks like you, Luke, your story and really what people, essential services like you are doing for their communities. So, to that end, as we think about people as the denominator, maybe talk a little more about why you're using density to count us.
Well, it's funny because I guess like it was just an idea, or like a scientific experiment for me in the beginning. It's like, can I get sales over people? And then suddenly with the rise of COVID, it became a safety thing. So all of a sudden, everyone cares about people counting and how many people are in a space and how far they are apart. So we instantly, and actually through really your help, Graham, you reached out and told us we had this capability. We lowered the capacity of the store from 25 to 15 at any given time. And then we set up alerts within the system that sends me a message and just right to my phone and lets me know when we hit that point, that limit, or actually when we're approaching it. So you usually get an alert around 11 or 12 people. The really cool thing about that, as opposed to sort of other stores, is we all have to count people. And I see it at Costco, I see it at Sam's, I see it at HEB, people are counting people. But if you're using a person to do it, aren't we sort of like adding to the problem?
Yeah, that's a good point. And to that point, like, how have you changed your business? How have you changed how you interact with your community when COVID started really becoming a problem?
Well, it's the word essential that got me is when they sort of included like convenience stores among nurses and doctors. I felt like we had a really big obligation to help and kind of live up to that word as much as possible. And so the idea is that we converted a lot of our store, 50% of our inventory actually, to grocery and pantry-like items, so that people had access to eggs and milk and bread, spaghetti, stuff like that. That's not normally our business, nor was that necessarily the path we were on. But, you sort of do what's called for.
Yeah. Any other thoughts there? Anything about are you going to continue doing this post-COVID, do you think?
I guess like it's kind of, someone else asked me a similar question the other day, and it's a difficult question to ask for me to answer, because it's sort of like asking me, will I continue to play after the dice are finished rolling? And they're in the air right now. So I don't know, because everything is sort of moment to moment. But one big lesson I've taken out of this is that it's best and easiest actually in my heart and for business to just sort of adapt to whatever the community needs. And this is a place where my wife and I, our backgrounds in digital actually come really to play, because we're very familiar with agile pivoting, sort of testing and learning. So we're testing and learning our way into the next phase, and whatever's appropriate, whatever the community needs, well, that's what we're going to do.
Awesome. Well, thanks for those insights. With that, I'd actually love to kind of walk everybody through your specific data and have you tell that story. Sound good?
Sure.
Cool. Let me just switch my Discord here. And we are back. So at a very high level, this is the density dashboard. So I love to think about this as there's individual spaces. So for here, there's Jefferson Bodega's entrance, Luke. And this is in real time. So it looks like somebody actually just entered your store. So we're going from 700 milliseconds to 1 minute. Is that true?
That is entirely accurate.
Awesome. What I really like about this as well is that we're seeing here what the legal capacity is, but to your point, you set a target capacity at 15 people. How did you arrive at that number?
So the idea was that we looked at the amount of space in each store, which is roughly 900 square feet, and then we figured how many people individually could we fit within there at 6 feet apart. Now, the really interesting learning was looking at this dashboard initially when we were thinking about that, we realized it doesn't exactly always work, because what happens is oftentimes people will come in small groups, usually their families or their spouse, something like that, their partner. And so as they come, they cluster. So we didn't just want to look at individual people, we also want to look at as people groups based on the size of the store.
Ah, got it. And so I showed earlier these alerts you're getting. We worked with you to set this up, but I'd love to take a look here. Luke, we want you obviously to maintain those numbers, and I think you've actually been really cool. One thing we've done to help with that is set up text alerts like this. So I'll show you Luke's in a moment, but I can set this so that I will get a text when there's 10 people in the store, right? If you're in the back, Luke, you probably can use that to come forward and make sure that everybody's getting what they need. And I think we set this when, occupancy is over 11 people. And then if 2 more come in, you'll get another text. Is that useful to you?
It's super useful. And I got to tell you, the really cool feature here is the lack of my having to interact with it. So what I've done is I've now, when I get those text messages from that phone number from you guys, basically I set it up with special ringtone. When that noise goes off and my phone vibrates, I don't have to think about it. It's not like I have to look up or monitor a dashboard or do anything. It's, I now know as soon as that hits, I turn to the door and I say, hey, please wait outside, and we take our time.
That's awesome. At sort of that point, I actually also really wanted to show this off because I was going through your data and I thought it was pretty cool. Last month, we're looking at your entrances and it tells a really compelling story. So we're seeing here kind of a business as usual for Jefferson Bodega. But then, what happened on March 23rd?
Well, that was sort of when we started getting serious, I guess, about locking down, and products started getting scarce. So right around that time, we got a huge wave of really new customers that were sort of desperately looking for baby food, bread, stuff like that. And that was right in the heart of when we're changing over our business model and trying to meet that need.
Oh, great. When you started enforcing these 15-person limits, how did you do that?
It's actually, it's just like a lot of things in the store. The neighborhood is with us. So it's super easy. We just say, hey, can you please wait outside? And people will monitor themselves. Occasionally I'll go stand outside the door and do my best to entertain people with my really lame jokes. But that's the idea. There's 2 of us that run the store, so we can go back and forth. And I have previously sometimes, as people came in with dogs or whatever, I'd stand outside and guard dogs and stuff like that. So me standing outside and trying to entertain people who could care less about my entertainment is the norm.
Oh, cool. I love that. You provide a service as the local court jester as well.
Yeah. Well, we really want to be part of the neighborhood, and that is a big part of why we're not just like data focused, but there's a personality to our bodega as well, and it's the personality of the neighborhood.
Yeah, I actually, it's worth a Google, everybody. There's a great local news article and video on Luke, his bodega, and how they're interacting with their community. It's really fun to watch. And so I'm looking at the analytics tab, which would help you eventually compare other sensors. But if as we look toward whatever the next normal looks like, to your point, the dice are still in the air, but do you have any early theories and thoughts on how you're going to keep using data to understand your space over time?
It's actually become more important than ever. See, so as I was saying earlier, like density is my denominator. So yeah, my volume is up, but I need to look at my other data, like my operational costs, which are also way up because of all the cleaning products, et cetera, and that, and put it against the volume of traffic. So really what's fascinating to me is as I watch the overall business change, and had I not had the count of people, I wouldn't really know what's going on. I'd only like have half the equation. So future-wise, I'm not really sure. But I do know that the cool thing about using this kind of data to help inform the decision is it means I'm not like sort of alone and just guessing from my gut.
That's awesome. Thanks for that. And then dashboards, you and I have worked together to set this up, but overall, like we've set this up so that once a week you're getting that email, right, on Monday afternoon and Thursday afternoon. Is that helping you kind of look at the theater level of Bodega and what you're doing?
Absolutely. And now I may be biased here because I'm like a data addict. But I just like looking in general and seeing what the foot traffic trends are. But like I say, once I export that and include it into some of our other data, it's really, it really is kind of my favorite part about this business is that I feel like we're looking at things, retail from a perspective that no other retailer is looking at except for very big people at a very high level.
Awesome. By the way, how are you ingesting all that data? How are you mashing it together to make these insights?
So I'm an old school data guy and I pull everything into Excel and have a custom spreadsheet where I run the numbers against it and have beautiful little reports I get to look at. It's actually our dream too to start sharing some of these reports out with not just the vendors so that they can see how Pepsi selling against other soda products, but also with the community. I think people will be interested to know, in the real world, what wins, Bud Light or Miller Lite?
That's actually a really awesome idea. The actual real world taste test.
My wife and business partners like to say we're independent. We're one of San Antonio's very few independent convenience stores. So she likes to say we're independent, so we're honest.
Totally true. All right, so that kind of concludes the dashboard walkthrough. But thinking about your density experience specifically, what was installation like, and how's support been for you?
Really easy. It's basically you just drill in a couple of screws and drop the thing in. It's got to be measured a certain distance from the floor and from the ceiling. But I really like that the software, the configuration, the accuracy testing, not only is that done by you guys, but then it's also monitored by you guys. I think you called me a couple of weeks ago and said that my accuracy was at 96% and you wanted to get it up. And having spent a career in data, I'm like 96% is pretty darn good.
We aim high. And we definitely want to see that go up over time, but we're super excited to hear that. And then just switching over one last time. And appreciate your patience. And then finally, before we move on to Q&A, do you have any further thoughts, feelings, insights you want to share? Anything else?
I think I'd just like to take the opportunity really to say thank you to you guys. Really appreciate the partnership and the help. I appreciate you guys working with such a small company as ours and then doing it in such a big way as though we're a big company. Really cool. And I'd also like to thank really the neighborhood and the community for coming together. As I said, we're not doing anything that everyone else isn't doing. We're all doing our best. And it's been really, really, really joyous and wonderful and everyone come together in a time like this.
Awesome. Well, one last thing before we hop into Q&A. I always just want to get a sense of for you, what advice do you have for other people who are looking at tackling this problem?
Honestly, I think it's really simple. So it's similar to all data. Once you have the question in your mind, you start looking for the answer. So if your question is, how many people at any given time are in my store? Then there are many ways to answer it. The easiest, fastest, the most automated way that I found was working with you guys.
Well, thanks for that ringing endorsement. With that, I'd love to turn to Q&A, both for you and I. It looks like we already have one. Bill, you're asking, is the hardware power over Ethernet? It is. That's the best way to do it, power a network over Ethernet, but you can also plug it in using an injector and then connect to your Wi-Fi. Luke, how have you set up density?
Yeah, we use a PoE functionality. Because it's mounted above a door, I find less wires better, so using the PoE is best.
Awesome. Cool. And then, oh, how is the data transmitted? Is it cloud-based? Good question. Yeah, Density is storing our data entirely in the cloud. So that data that we've shown for Luke over time, you'll be able to draw from the cloud at any point for all time. One thing we really like to talk about is that data is stored in our cloud, but because Density isn't a camera, you don't have to worry about personal information or anything like that. Is that something you have worried about in your career, Luke?
Absolutely. So, especially in the past, say, 8 years or so, as data became so prevalent and my mom started asking me what the cloud was. Yeah. So my whole theory and my approach to data has always been, if you don't capture it and keep it in your system, then there's no sort of problem. So with our sales data, what we're always tracking is we're tracking what sells. I'm not tracking anybody's credit card number. I'm not tracking anybody individually. There's nothing like that, which is one of the reasons there's such a synergistic relationship with your organization, because you're not capturing anybody's faces. You're just capturing a general description of what walks through the door and counting it appropriately. I love that sort of anonymous approach. It keeps everybody safe.
Awesome. And then one other question. So do we ever expect the local health department or similar to acquire stores to record occupancy rates for safety reasons? I've seen that in some counties, including Washington, and including some counties in Washington and other places. Is that something that you're seeing in San Antonio or in Texas more broadly, Luke?
Not particularly, but one of the things I've learned, actually I really sort of picked this up at HBO. They were really proactive as we moved into digital. They were proactive of doing things like adding captions, even when there wasn't necessarily the law on the digital front of captions. And I remember at the time I was part of that project, and I asked one of the leaders, why are we spending the money on something that's not necessarily a legal requirement? And he said, because shouldn't we act as though it is? And so that's the idea, is that I kind of like, look, it may not be a requirement now, but shouldn't we act as though it is? Shouldn't we behave as though it is? And should something horrible happen, I would love to have, sort of data to look back and sort of match it against what happened.
Yeah, so truly be like thought leaders and community leaders and proactive in keeping people safe.
That's our job. That's our job, really, is all of us are leaders in whatever it is that we're doing. And we have a responsibility, really, to do our best. And if counting people turns from just being sort of a really cool data feature or novelty to a way to keep people safe, I'm all in.
Fantastic. So, Luke, what are your plans for growth, if any?
Honestly, we are so day to day right now. We're more focused on survival, if I'm being perfectly honest. But growth is initially, we have this property next to us, and during the ordeal, I would like to welcome any company, organization, anything that's got any way to donate masks or anything else that the community needs, canned goods or anything like that. They can use our property for free. And in the future, I would hope to build out here some sort of a restaurant or eating or a way for the neighborhood to kind of hang out. Especially after all this, I would really, really, really like to make a place where people felt they could gather.
Oh, got it. So kind of double down on serving people burgers in your community.
Yeah, one of the things we've always said about Bodega is we don't just want to be like a convenience store, but we want to be a respite. We want to be like a place you come in and you leave energized and recharged. If I could find a way to extend that to an experience where people can sit down and enjoy it, I'd really like to do that.
Awesome. Cool. Well, so one other question that's coming in. Are there temperature limitations? So perhaps the ability to install outside or something like that. Density, this is a good question. So Luke, I know your store is climate controlled, right?
It is.
Yeah. So Density typically does well in indoor climate controlled environments, but obviously every space is unique. Just like your doorway, Luke, is probably different from that of the folks across the street. So we would love to follow up with that on a case-by-case basis. One last thing, Luke, Bud Light or Miller Lite?
I'm a San Antonio guy, and so I gotta say Bud Light.
Done. Awesome. Most important question of the webinar. Luke, thank you so much for your time. I think we're going to call it a wrap, but any other parting thoughts? Anything else we can do?
No, just again, thank you for your time and your partnership. Really do appreciate everyone coming together now.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Luke. I wish you the best next time in San Antonio. I'll push you to swing by, and we'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Right on. Looking forward to it. Thanks, everyone.
Right on. Thanks a lot, Luke. Take care.